Today at Solus Partners, we're really excited to have Len from Blits on. Len, could you tell us a little bit about your story and how you came up with the idea of Blits?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Nice for having me, Stephen. Yeah, I'm Len. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Blits AI, and we've been pursuing the art of interaction between humans and machines for 6 years now. Been a little bit on the early curve, so that was a bit of a struggle a couple of years ago. But with all the new technology going on right now and all the AI stuff, it's been a very busy couple of years, the last couple of years. Yeah, a lot of things have happened in the last 6 years, but we've always been pursuing like how can we improve the communication between humans and machines, right? So the first time I was introduced to these technologies, I was really like, okay, it should be a different way we can communicate with these machines, right? We are so used to using mouses and keyboards to interact with data and then getting predefined structures on the screen, which doesn't feel natural, right? So if you just talk to a human, you just say what you want and you get an answer, right? So, and Google in the last 20, 25 years got a bit of that, right? Asking a question to Google, but it felt incomplete, right? So it's not that you can ask your company system a question and then it returned an answer. So from that question, it was like ambitious. How can we improve that? And still, right? So now we're talking about AI engines talking to you like advanced chatbots, but what will the future bring? Maybe Neuralink or something telepathic or something. There should be better ways to interact with the data for a human being. So that's a really quick backstory.
That's a really cool primer. What industries are you guys seeing this need for kind of human-like interaction?
I think it's not industry specific, to be honest. I think it's human specific, right? So to put it on a negative phrase, we're all a bit lazy, right? So that's how generally people work, right? So we do want the least amount of action to get to our results. And we see this on Instagram or on our phones. The less buttons we get, the faster, the more addicted we get to getting to the specific content we want. But the same applies everywhere, right? If you're in a manufacturing company, you don't want to read that many manuals, right? You just want to know which bolt to put where. And in the medical sense as well, you don't want to read 200 studies to know which diagnosis you have to take for this specific patient. So I think over the full width of all industries, we see huge benefits and use cases for improved communication between humans and machines. And I think that's also why it's funny. We always start out with the simple use cases, right? So if we talk to companies and we're doing services for companies, it always starts out with customer support or let's do some marketing with some customers, right? They're very, very useful use cases, but also the very top of the iceberg. But there are so many use cases I've learned in the last couple of years that are also very exciting. Like, let me give you a quick example, Stephen. So a lot of consultant companies are very busy maintaining their workforce, like the Big Four or McKinsey, right? So they want to, if you've been a consultant, you know the drill to fill a timesheet, right? So every week you have to fill timesheets. So there's a lot of work being done in making sure you get these timesheets right, but also in time. Using some kind of better mechanism to like getting those data from those consultants out into the machine. Okay, what did you do this week? Were you happy with it? Where do you need results? It's like a couple of simple questions you can let the computer ask your workforce. And then based on that, you have a way better understanding how your workforce is performing, what it did, and where it needs additional help. And these are these use cases you won't think about if you say, okay, let's think about chatbots, right? But a lot of companies will get a lot of value while exploring these specific type of use cases.
That makes a lot of sense. I would have a real need for that in a former life. That's pretty neat. Could you walk through a few other case examples across some of the clients that you guys have?
Yeah, sure. So it ranges very widely, right? So of course it starts with customer support. We have a couple of use cases there where, of course, there are huge workforces busy with providing customers or other companies with just some basic information or status updates. Where's my package? What's the shipping? When can it be delivered? How do I restart my router? All these specific user support type of use cases, which are normally call center agents or FAQs or some forms of data sitting somewhere within the company and needs to be summarized and pinpointed to a customer to make sure they can get the service or they can get the support they need. So those are, of course, still present there, and a lot is being done there. The second thing, I think a lot of use cases are now around customer acquisition, right? So think about insurers. If you want to calculate a new insurance, okay, you can do it with like all these forms, but an improved alternative way is using a couple of AI engines to generate, okay, your need. Okay, you have a car. Okay, what kind of car? How much do you drive? And more in an interaction type of way, which lowers barriers and increase sales. So, and especially for intermediaries, like the insurer has its own channels, but especially if you want to compare all these insurers, then you add a layer of complexity, which is really logical in these types of use cases. Then we also see a bit of branding use cases. Right? A lot of digital humans were actively for a couple of use cases deploying 3D avatars, right? These real humans that talk to a specific person. And that's not just information. That's just like an additional employee with a branding, with a voice, with an emotion, which is really extension, and in some cases even are mimicked from real users like influencers or professional football players or something like that, which extends your brand. So it's not only support, but it's also how you position your brand in the market. So we see a lot of companies working towards that as well with us. And there's a lot of, so we have internal use cases where project managers are assigning projects via bots. We see credit card offers being shared to banking employees or banking customers. Like, okay, I do want a credit card offer which is nearby, or what can I do with my specific credit card? So we show these kinds of use cases. So the sky is the limit in terms of, if you think about it, you can build it. I think that's also what I really like about this field. We're not focusing on one specific use case. We're focusing, okay, how can we use this technology for your company to make a bit of a unique use case that really helps that company, right, be competitive, instead of making one tool that fits 100,000 of users. That would work as well, but then you have the same as all the other 100,000. I think having that diversity really helps in current landscape.
Sure. Well, I mean, from customer support to branding and strategic positioning, and then just promotional offers, sounds like you guys have a really dynamic offering. How were you guys able to build a team around that?
Ups and downs, and of course a lot of trial and error. So there's not a playbook you can get from this. So let's start out with something you see right now. So AI is hot, right? So it has been for the last couple of years. So as a consequence, everyone is an expert today. So if you go to LinkedIn or to an event, so there are a lot of people that are pursuing and saying that there are experts. And we also see this in applicants, right? So if you did something slightly, even on the engineering part, slightly with some kind of machine learning / complex algorithm type, then you're an AI expert today. And of course, that's not really the case, because maybe in that specific field, but if you look at AI as a whole, there are so many different aspects to AI. If you want to text to voice, for example, that's already so niche of a field where you need a lot of experience to really understand that field, how it works, what are the differences, how do languages compete to each other, what are the providers in the market, etc. So it's very difficult to be an expert today in AI, because there are only a couple of people who are really doing this for 10 years plus, right? So, and those are the hardcore engineers that been studying with PhDs and in the basement of Google with all these engines, and the rest are just fanatics that try new stuff, which is great. So coming back to your question, you need to train these people, and we need to train ourselves as well, because we don't know everything also. And tomorrow there's a new technology as well. So we keep on investing in educating new people, but also in ourselves. And once in a while, we are able to find someone with that specific experience, and then that's like a unique gift.
Sure. So it sounds like you guys have had a great journey over the last 6 years. Can you, and for fellow entrepreneurs that might be listening or viewing the podcast, can you talk a little bit about kind of the highs and lows of that journey over the last 6?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And we're a European-based company. So let's start out with one thing I've learned about the US market is we might be too honest, right? So if you're saying it's been a year very successful, then my first response would always be, yeah, define success, right? So, and yes, we're very successful in terms of money and customers now, but that hasn't been the case for a long time. And also, I can't predict the future, right? So what happens in 6 months or 12 months could be a completely different ballgame, because what we see is that this market moves very rapid. So you might be a superstar now, but in 6 or 12 months, the whole landscape might have changed, right? So there's a new company or a new vision or a new technology that disrupts the rest. So from that perspective, what I've learned is that you have to focus on the now, right? So capture all the value now, not in the future, not in the past. See what we can do now for our customers and for future customers, and do that every 6 months, right? So, and then you keep on being relevant, because in the beginning we did not, right? So we had a vision in the beginning, like, let's be a next $1 billion startup and let's build something everyone wants to use. And we're focusing on, okay, how can we get to that? How can
Totally
we get
fine.
to that, like, product that is super value in the next 10 years? And by doing that, you're focusing on the long-term tail. So you're saying no to customers that might need your help now. You're making decisions that slim down your market or extend your market. So by focusing on the future, yeah, we lost a lot. And also we gained, of course, a lot of knowledge, but there's a sweet, delicate balance in there, in focusing on now and the future. And I think what I've learned is that it's better to focus on the now, because there are problems today, there are solutions we can provide today. And in the long run, it will. So we've been doing that for the last 6 years, and that compiles, right? So it's accumulates to what we have today, even if we didn't thought about that 6 years ago, right? So, and that's really a high for me, because it's, if you're open for these chances and for these opportunities, then they will stack. It's not just let's earn some money here or earn some money there, but if you combine that knowledge, you see something unique and you can create something new. So that's not really an answer to your question, what some ups, some, but it's at least some experience and some takeaways.
Makes a lot of sense.
I can continue that if you want to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, feel free.
Yeah, and so it's very cool. Very cool story. Before I started Blitz, I really wanted to have a startup, right? So, and what do you do if you want a startup? You read a lot of startup books. You look at Dragon's Den and all these online investors, and you speak to a lot of people, and you want to have a vision. So, from that perspective, you do all the right things in order to prep yourself for being an entrepreneur and creating a startup. But what no one can teach you, or what's not in the average message that's being sent across these stories, is that how do you cope with the stress or with the uncertainty of not paying people, right? So, or making the wrong decision, or a customer not paying you. So these are theoretical concepts you can read about, but the art of doing that, living that, and being in that center of okay, what I say, if you're stepping into a meeting and the result of that meeting could mean a difference between like 400,000 euros and zero, it's, from a theoretical point of view, it feels very logical. But from an if you've never been in that position and you have to learn, okay, it matters how I act in this meeting. It's very difficult to learn that from books, and you have to create that experience and work with people who have done that before. It's a learning journey from actively doing that, which has been great, but also is sometimes very difficult.
Yeah, and stressful sometimes, moments.
Yeah, definitely.
That makes a lot of
shapes
sense.
you, I think, as a person, also in a private life. I always say to people, at least in my environment, like, I'm not saying you're born as an entrepreneur, but it's a certain type of personality that fits that role, right? So, and I don't think everyone's capable of doing that, because it's if you really stay up all night about the risk of the thought of not be able to pay someone, or turning down a customer, or don't do a good project or something. Yeah, if you can't put that aside, then you have a difficult time as an entrepreneur, I assume.
Sure. I think a lot of people would struggle with the uncertainty and just the unknowns, and just frankly challenging cash flow situations that emerge in most entrepreneurial paths.
I have a good story about cash flow,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
cash flow is something you don't learn. So I've studied at university, and you learn the P&L, and also I've worked for one of the big four companies, which is an accountant firm, right? So you know how the books work, how accountancy works. Okay, if you get this amount of turnover and this is your cost, and then you have profit. So it's like very clear, right? But then
Right.
in the practice, if a customer neglects to pay for 2 months, yeah, you can have it all in the books, but if you're missing those euros, that's something different. And one thing I've learned in that process, like we also say this here in the office, we only celebrate when the money is in the bank.
Exactly.
Of course, you might slightly celebrate, but due to all the facts, even if everything is signed and you're working with the biggest companies in the world, even if that's the case, you can't celebrate until it's in the bank. I think that's one of the best learnings I had in the last couple of years.
Until that wire clears, there's no balloons that are going up. So I
No.
think it's wise.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you mentioned that there's a lot of changes and advancements coming in the field of AI. How do you guys stay ahead of that, or how do you differentiate the true AI integrations that you guys offer relative to others?
Yeah, so maybe to give a bit of a backstory on Blitz. So we never started out to beat the market, right? So from the beginning, we wanted to create like a toolbox for bigger companies, enterprises, to have that flexibility to switch between technologies. Because I was working as a senior project manager at one of these big four companies. And what I found out is a lot of these companies are already doing these projects already a couple of years ago, because that's their nature, right? Innovate and try new technologies. They're spending millions on these systems, but they're not happy still. Typical, if you, over the last 30 years, typically how a company selects software is the following. Someone in the company says, we need a system for this A or B, like say a ticketing system. Then they start getting all the requirements from all these departments and from the stakeholders and business, and then they create an RFP, right? So a lot of companies can make huge proposals on these requirements, and then based on that, they select a vendor, right? So that's typically how it's been done in the last 30 years. But they select a vendor for the next coming 4 or 5 years, because if you select a new ticketing system or a new ERP system, you're fixed for the next 5 years and do a process all over again, right? So, but in the terms of what we saw in AI is that the quality of today doesn't define the quality of tomorrow, right? So we see the huge improvements going every month on all these models and vendors. So next week, Google's better, and then Amazon is better, and then DeepSeek is better, and then we have something great from OpenAI. And so there's like this chasing game on these models because they are improving while people are using it, and someone has a new innovation which leaps it even further. So from that perspective, it doesn't make sense to lock yourself in for the next 5 years for Microsoft, right? So why should you select a tool now for the next 5 years and then figure out that a year later you would be better off with Google for a couple of years, and then maybe IBM or so that didn't match from our perspective. So what we set out to achieve is like creating a flexible layer, like an ecosystem where you can cherry pick and switch between those services. I think nowadays you would call it a meta framework or a meta infrastructure, but the whole goal was for companies not to be locked into a specific technology, and that helps them to further accelerate these kinds of deployments and improve the quality of the performance. So that's how Blitz started. And when we started this, we started on the conversational AI space, which was machine learning based, basically advanced chatbots. And 3 years ago, we pivoted to the generative AI space and combined those two, because in the end, it's all machine human interaction, which I started out. So we're just looking at other technologies to add to that toolbox for customers to switch if they want something. So it sounds like a strategy, but let's make it practical.
Sure.
So what we do, we have a toolbox, we have a software system which we roll out to customers, a platform, and there they really can switch between all these services. So if they build something, they build it in our system, but they choose, I want DeepSeek for a model, and I want OpenAI for text to speech, and I want Google for intent recognition, and I want IBM for sentiment analysis, and I want to run this on the Google Cloud, right? So all these elements you select as a company, and then it's delivered, right? So it's made like, I would say we're like the car chassis. We build the chassis, but you define which engine you want to use, which tires you want to use, and who's going to drive it, because that's the next level. So we give you the car, but then in this case, some customers are started to ask us a couple of years ago, can you build it for us? Because you've seen so many use cases, help us build it. Because in the beginning we thought, okay, here's the car, do it yourself. But we found out, yeah, this is so new and there's a lot of variances and improvements and changes, which you just mentioned. And our job is to keep up with these changes. So who's better to implement those changes than we are? So next to our platform, we've implemented an implementation part of our company, which is just busy building these experiences, either on chatbots, voice bots, or digital humans, just for these customers. And we can do this way faster because we have our own system that connects to all these systems.
That's really cool dynamic customization. That's seems pretty unique relative in the field of AI, that where you can just kind of plug and play as to different aspects of different LLMs. It's very cool. So hats off to that. I can't imagine the development that went into that to make that possible.
It is. We've spent a lot of time in investing in this. So we connect, I think, currently over 80 APIs or 80 models/services. So it's for a startup, it's a lot. And I recall a discussion with a senior developer or architect a couple of years ago, and he was really, how can you guys really do this? Because even maintaining 1 or 2 integrations takes a lot of time on your team. And that's correct, right? So we need to maintain this. But I think that's where our added value comes in, because we maintain all these connections and services. That means our customers don't have to do it. And they can just focus on, okay, I want this use case. It needs to be deployed in this region. I want to use this model. Now, okay, this model is not performing. Okay, let's use this model, and just focus on the actual value that it creates for end customers.
Very interesting. And kind of on that note, in referencing some of those prior use cases you mentioned around kind of customer support and promotional offerings and strategic messaging, could you walk us through maybe 1 or 2 kind of key customer wins or how they're seeing real value with Blitz?
Yeah, sure. So I think one thing that on the use case specifics, I think what we have learned is that we implemented so many use cases there, so that we use these experience across use cases, right? So some use cases don't require emotions, for example, right? So if you talk about, okay, I want a chatbot on my website, creating an own persona on that is very difficult to do right. If you're, for example, Coca-Cola, and you want a specific bot that really fixated around your brand, you can do whole studies around that. It's very difficult to do so. So usually these kinds of bots don't have a persona, right? And they're not defined as bot sums. It's like an advanced search or so these kind of use cases are very different than, okay, we really need a digital sponsor for our branding, and which is really has an emotion and can be sad or happy. So those 2 fields are very different. And we see also, and I think our added value is that we do all these specific use cases and then combine the knowledge in all the new work we're doing. And that really makes these bots better over time. And also on some use cases we actively advise to slim it down, because if we go to a new customer and the customer has let's say I want bot A for this specific market with this need, usually they start out with, I want this bot to do everything. Right? And in practice, that doesn't work, because either it does something very well or it has to do everything very well. And that everything very well is impossible. So most of our jobs is also to be like that realistic partner where we say, okay, this is possible with the current technology. This is it. Yeah, that depends on the use case.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think your tailored focus application is probably results in better customer success and experience. So that seems to be some wise wisdom.
And what we would so you always say, if we come back to your initial question, right? Okay, what's the added value in most use cases? So we define it as two different brackets. So the one is cost reduction, right? So if we look at customer satisfaction, customer support, those are usually driven about costs, right? I have 500 people in a service center. I do need to reduce that, or at least get the workload off them so I don't have to hire new people, or I can let them do other work, more complex work. So costs are one part of the value, and the other use cases are driving business, right? So I want to do more projects, so we need to have a better project management system aligned, or we do want to sell more car insurances. And both work, but both are very different because customer, if you want to cost, that's a very different kind of conversation you're having than if you say, I want to drive sales. If you want my personal preferences, that the second one is the much more fun one, because then you're really exploring, okay, how can we drive more sales, for example, in a new market or in existing market with a new channel, and that brings out the pioneer part in us, because then we really need to think along with the customer, okay, what can we do from previous use cases and how can we use this here in order to drive the business. On the cost cutting, we know how it works, right? So it's not that it's boring. I'm not saying that, but it's very common, right? To say, okay, we need a new system. Okay, then we cut 15% and we automate it. Okay, yes. And it's also not the headlines you will find in newspapers, but if you create a new experience for a company that is selling its services in a new innovative way, then you might reach the newspapers. But both we are doing.
I mean, that's sounds like real ROI there. So that's encouraging to hear, and just better helps us better understand just where you guys are servicing your needs amongst customers. Thank you for that. Could you give us a little bit of an idea around kind of where you see Blitz going over the next, call it 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So as I mentioned in the beginning, so we're trying to focus on the now, right? Because
Sure.
we do have plans, but it's very difficult to say so because we're based in Europe. We do have customers across the globe, in Canada, in the Middle East, in Africa, Europe, of course. So we're already like globally spread, and we're really investing now in our Middle Eastern and Asia Pacific region. So that's where our focus is in the next 6 months. But due to the fact that our company is brought up in Corona, is like we're 100% remote, right? So our team is also remote. So that means the barrier to entry on specific markets is quite low. So from that perspective, I know we're going to enter a couple of new markets and expand both on our platform side and on our services side to meet the demand we're currently facing.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you guys are poised for some pretty significant growth. So I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So in the last 2 years, we grow 300% every year. So that's our aim. So 300% this year as well, and we're still on track. So let's see if we can keep up with that growth. Again, I think we're quite unique in not in the software. There are a lot of software vendors out there, right? So yes, we do have unique software in the last 5 years. And what we have built is quite impressive, but I don't want to focus on that because I think the combination of not only building the software, but helping these companies implement that and creating the value with it, I think that's where most startups and scale-ups differ from strategy, because they rather let other people do it because it sounds more scalable, right? And we've learned that I think both can be true. Help these companies, really hand-holding them, and create awesome software together. So that's where our focus is.
I think that's well placed. So for potential customers or people that want to learn more about Blitz, what's the best way to get in touch with you or your team?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You can always go to our website, right? So www.blits.ai, where we have a contact form, which feels very it feels very formal. But if people are, I get really excited about like talking about use cases. So my strength is in really helping bridge the gap between, okay, what's possible today with all the technology there is out there in the market, and what are the business needs. So I've been a consultant quite a while, and I know what drives these businesses and what are the business problems. So having these moments with the business decision makers and being that sparring partner is really what drives my position in the firm. How can we help that, right? So if there are people really looking out for, okay, I want some advice on that, or your insight on how this would work for my use case, feel free to email me directly. That's totally fine. Happy to take the time and investigate your use case.
Well, Len, this has been really great insight into Blitz and just kind of in general, some insight around just AI. So we really appreciate your time today.
Amazing. Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Absolutely.